Today, we're stepping into a story from Genesis 16. And let me tell you, it's an ancient story, but it feels so incredibly close to home. It's all about faith, about what happens when we get impatient, and about the absolutely staggering mercy of God. And it all starts with a question that I think every single one of us has probably wrestled with at some point.
Right? What do? You've been given this amazing promise, this incredible hope from God Himself, but the silence just keeps stretching on. The waiting becomes this heavy, almost unbearable thing. Well, that very human crisis is exactly what sparks the intense drama we're about to get into. So at the heart of this story, we have Abram and Sarai. Now, these two are carrying a promise from God that is just massive. It's world-changing. God has told them they would have an heir and that their family would be more numerous than the stars. And let's be really clear about this timeline because it's so important. This isn't just a few months of doubt creeping in. We are talking about 10 years. A full decade has gone by since they arrived in Canaan, just holding on to this divine promise. I mean, can you imagine? For 10 long years, every single sunrise is just another reminder that the promise hasn't happened yet. That kind of waiting would test absolutely anyone's faith.
You can just feel the toll that decade of waiting has taken, especially on Sarai. In that culture, a woman's value was so wrapped up in having children, so her barrenness was this source of deep personal shame. And you can hear in her words, this is more than just a biological problem for her. She's concluded that God Himself has stopped her. Her hope has just soured into this painful belief that God isn't just being silent, He's actively working against her.
So what happens when our faith gets worn down by that kind of pressure, year after year? Well, something else often rushes into the void, right? That all too human desire to just take control of the situation. The pain of waiting finally gives way to a plan, a very human solution to what was supposed to be a divine miracle.
Sarai lays out her plan. Abram should have a child with her Egyptian handmaid Hagar. Now look, using a surrogate like this was a recognized cultural custom at the time. But we have to see this for what it really is. This is a plan born from a place of deep pain, a place of desperation. It's them trying to engineer God's promise with their own hands, instead of just continuing to wait on Him.
Wow. Such a short, simple sentence, but it carries so much weight. Abram, the man who heard the voice of God, the patriarch, he now listens to the voice of his wife's pain and desperation. And he agrees. In that one moment, they step off the path of faith and trust, and they start down a path of their own making.
And this plan, this thing that was dreamed up in fear and impatience, it starts to fall apart almost right away. The very thing that was supposed to build their family, well, it just starts to tear it apart from the inside.
The fallout is immediate, and it is just brutal. The second Hagar realizes she's pregnant, the whole power dynamic in the house just shatters. Hagar looks at her barren mistress with contempt, and Sarai, instead of looking at her own part in this mess, she just lashes out. She blames Abram. Suddenly, the house isn't filled with hope anymore. It's filled with jealousy, blame, and bitterness.
And Abram's response here? It's just a shocking failure of leadership. A total abdication of his responsibility. I mean, this is the man who's supposed to be the father of nations, and he basically just washes his hands of the whole mess he helped create. Instead of protecting Hagar or trying to find a righteous way through this, he just passively hands her over to Sarai's anger, basically giving her permission to do whatever she wants.
And Sarai's bitterness turns into cruelty. Hagar, pregnant and now completely alone, is treated so harshly that she feels like she has no other choice but to run. She flees into the empty wilderness, an outcast, carrying the child of a broken plan.
But it's right here, in this moment of absolute despair for Hagar, pregnant, alone, running for her life in a barren desert, this is where the whole story turns. God shows up. And think about who He goes to find. Not Abram and Sarai in their tent, but the hurting, fugitive servant girl in the middle of nowhere. The tenderness of this moment is just astounding. The angel of the Lord finds her, calls her by her name, and even acknowledges her painful status, Sarai's maid. He sees her. He sees all of her. These questions aren't because He needs information. They're an invitation for her to just pour out her heart, to face her own hopeless situation.
Now, this is a really tough command. God tells her to go back to the very place that she just ran from. But this isn't a command to just go endure abuse. You have to see it as a necessary, humbling step that is tied directly to the incredible promise God is about to give her.
And then this happens. This moment of just breathtaking grace. God gives Hagar, the Egyptian servant, the outcast, a promise of her own.
And it sounds an awful lot like the promise he gave to Abram. He doesn't just comfort her pain, he meets her with a covenant blessing. She too will be the mother of a great nation. It's just grace upon grace.
This encounter with God just completely changes Hagar, and her response is one of the most powerful moments in the whole book of Genesis. It's a personal revelation about who God really is. So what does Hagar do? Something no one has ever done before in the Bible. She gives God a name, and the name she gives him comes straight from her experience, El Roi, the God who sees me. At the very moment she felt the most invisible, the most rejected, the most alone, she realized she was seen by God. For Hagar, this isn't theology. This is a life-changing personal truth. So Hagar obeys. She goes back, and the promise comes true. She has a son, and Abram himself names him Ishmael. That name means God will hear. It's like the whole family is acknowledging that God heard Hagar's cry out in the wilderness. And the chapter ends with this one simple, telling detail. Abram was 86 years old. So, yes, a son has been born, but he is not the promised child through Sarai. The long, difficult wait, it's still not over, not by a long shot. When you just step back and look at the whole story, the main truth really comes into focus. Abram and Sarai's impatience created a total mess, a storm of pain and conflict. But here's the thing, it could not stop God's sovereign plan. In fact, it was through their very human failure that God revealed something incredible about himself, his tender mercy for the outcast, his identity as El Roi, the God who sees.
And that brings this ancient story right into our lives today. It leaves us with a question to really think about. In those times when we feel invisible, or forgotten, or just lost in a wilderness of our own, how does everything change when we remember what Hagar discovered? When we truly know, deep down, that we are seen by El Roi, the God who sees me?